Welcome to the Podium Athlete, the show where we bring together elite athletes and coaches from around the world to discuss youth sports, mindset, training, and the pursuit of reaching the podium. I'm your host, Chris Fote, three-time Olympian and current head coach of the USA bobsled team. Today's guest is nothing short of extraordinary. Winter Vinecki is a 2022 Olympian and world-class aerial skier whose story has inspired millions. She started racing triathlons at just the age of 5. After losing her dad to cancer at age 9, she turned heartbreak and pain into purpose, founding a nonprofit, Team Winter, being the youngest athlete to run a marathon on all 7 continents, writing a book, and now representing Team USA on the world stage. Get ready to meet an athlete who defines resilience, grit, and living with purpose. Winter, tell me how training is going for the 2026 Olympic Games.
It's been an interesting process the last couple months, not the ideal process that I would have hoped for going to Olympics. Unfortunately, at the middle of last season, I was injured. I herniated my C6-7 disc in my neck, which was a pretty serious injury.
That sounds painful.
It was very painful. It happened on such a random jump. I literally was training some triples. I landed a jump good. Felt like I tweaked a muscle in my neck, but then I started getting radiating pain down my arm, and then one day woke up and a couple of my fingers were going numb. So I'm pretty used to pushing through injuries. I've sprained my ankle a million times, dealt with knee pain, all this stuff, but with those, you kind of have a little bit of leeway to just jump through it. With this, I knew it was something that I should not jump through, so I immediately called and was like, I need to get an MRI before I try to jump in the Deer Valley World Cup in 2 days. So I got an MRI. It was pretty severely herniated and pushing on my spinal cord and pinching off the nerve, which is why I was getting such bad pain down my arm.
Yeah.
And so I went down to Stedman Clinic, got a steroid injection in my neck. We were talking spinal fusion for a while, but thankfully we were able to just leave it for a month or two to see if it was going to heal on its own. And thankfully it made some good progress. And so we decided to go the non-surgical route so that it would give me the best chance of jumping in these upcoming games. And now over the last couple months, kind of through the bulk of a lot of the rehab and actually back to most of my normal training. I started back on the water ramps about 2 weeks ago. So just doing some singles right now. We'll work our way back up to the double and triple. So it's been a slow moving process. Definitely not the season I wanted to have last year going into the games this year, but thankfully everything's healing well so far.
No, I think that's one of the unique things about the Olympic Games is that because it only happens once every 4 years, if you have a bad season or get hurt the year before the games or even the year of the games, you have to wait 4 more years to have that chance. So I'm very glad to hear things are going better and you're back in the pool. So let's talk a little bit about that. You know, you jump on snow, right? So how does someone train? So I was just up in the mountains this last weekend. It's about 90 degrees up there. How are you training for your sport that's on snow right now?
So we're pretty lucky. We actually get to train into a pool all summer long. So unlike other winter sports who are constantly chasing the snow, aerials are one of the few that we can actually take a little break from the snow. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes we wish we had some more snow in the summertime, but we actually train on water ramps all summer long. So our main training facility is here in Utah, just up at the Utah Olympic Park. We have the freestyle pool. So it's a huge pool with million gallons of water. We have plastic jumps that go into the pool. So we're doing all of our jumps all summer long, learning new tricks, perfecting our current tricks to be able to get ready for snow.
Yeah, if you guys haven't seen this, there's a show here. The only ramp is here in Utah, correct? Up in Park City?
The only ramp that there's doubles and triples. Okay. So there's a couple other smaller facilities throughout the U.S. that have some single and maybe kind of makeshift double jumps, but mainly just up here is for the doubles and triples.
So if you have a chance, you're ever here in Park City, go up to the Utah Olympic Park and they will go 50 feet in the air doing flips and spins, all sorts of crazy things, and they land in the water, which I'm sure is cold because it's not heated. I'm
It's
right?
not heated.
Okay.
So it's very cold when we start in the summer.
Yep.
So we usually start around May, sometimes into June, but the water's still into the low 50s. And then when we finish in October, sometimes it's snowing when we're out on the ramp. So it doesn't feel good then. But right now in July, when it's 90 degrees, it feels pretty nice.
That's awesome. So obviously you do the jumps and you practice your actual craft, but what other training do you do as far as running, plyometrics, weight room type of exercises?
So there's a variety of things we do. The water ramping is our main focus, but we have to do a lot of things outside the water ramping to make sure that we're able to withstand the impacts of water and snow. So in the summertime, it's a lot of weight room stuff, a lot of strength training, especially legs, core, back. For me, a lot of neck strengthening right now, but as well as even just arms things, because you may not think we need much arm strength, but when you're taking impacts and slamming in the snow, you have to make sure all of those muscles in your shoulders and everything are there so that they can hold everything in place when you do take the big hits. Yep. So it's a lot of strength training. We also do a lot of work on trampolines and bungee system. So up at the Center of Excellence, we have a harness system that we strap ourselves into. It's got about 6 bungees on each side. We can lift ourselves up, and then we can do doubles and triples in the bungee to be able to work on those skills before we have to do them on the water ramps for the first time. Yep. And so it's kind of a combination of a lot of trampoline, bungee, strength training, and then of course all the rehab and recovery things on top of that.
Yes, and that's another thing that a lot goes into sport is what they don't see on the hill is you're training in the weight room, you train on the ski jumps, but also afterwards, the amount of rehab, nutrition, sports psych type of resources that we use to keep ourselves healthy and in the right mind space. Now, so I came from the sport of bobsled. I competed at 3 games. We're sliding down on track at 90 miles an hour. So we're usually known as kind of the crazy winter sport, but I would argue that you guys are right up there with us in the fact that, again, every time you jump, you're 30, 40, 50 feet in the air spinning and you have to land.
I think a lot of the winter sports are definitely hold the title of more of the crazier side of athletics as opposed to like your running or swimming and summer sports like that.
So let's talk how you got into doing this sport. I'd like to jump back into your childhood. You started competing in sports at a very young age, doing triathlons at age 5, right?
Yep.
What other sports were you doing at that time, or was it mostly triathlons and running-based sports?
I tried all kinds of sports growing up. I have 3 brothers, so we were a very active, competitive household. If one of us wanted to do a sport, we kind of all had to try it. So I tried everything from dancing to soccer to karate to then the running and triathlons. And that's what I really found I enjoyed. And so the majority of the time I spent my summers competing in triathlons and running races. And then I was a ski racer in the wintertime. So I would have my summer sports and my winter sports, and I would do both. I never knew what aerial skiing was. There wasn't a freestyle community where I grew up in Michigan. I grew up skiing Boyne Mountain, and it's more of a hill, about 400 vertical feet. So it's tiny compared to anything out here.
Yep.
But I grew up doing those sports up until I found aerials.
Okay. So at age 5, I have some kids. I have 10, 8, 5, and a newborn. A sport like triathlon takes a lot of cardio. You have to be pretty mentally strong to do that. Were you always just a mentally strong, you enjoyed doing those endurance type sports, or did your parents kind of help encourage you and get you into those sports?
I'd say a lot of it definitely came from my parents. My mom was an athlete. She wasn't super competitive when she was in high school or college or anything, but after she had us kids, she was always staying active, and she actually got into the running and triathlon world through my uncle. So she was doing Ironmans and marathons before me. And I just remember her always having such a hardworking, go-getter attitude towards anything, no matter what it was, no matter how hard it seemed to be, my mom was going to get it done. She was also a OB-GYN, so she worked full-time. Wow. She was raising us 4 kids. And then, unfortunately, my dad passed away from prostate cancer, so she became a single mom of us 4 kids, and that never seemed to slow her down.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Your dad was diagnosed with a pretty aggressive prostate cancer. You were 9 years old at the time. How did that loss, I guess, impact your desire to keep competing in sports and kind of your desire to want to keep doing those things as you kind of work through that grief and that pain?
I always loved athletics because it was a way for me to go out there and push myself, to have fun, and to be around like-minded individuals. Even from a very young age, I wanted to use my athletics as well as like a way to help other people. And originally, I was going to form Team Winter for childhood obesity. So I really was interested in getting kids active, getting them out there, because I hated going to school and seeing the overweight kids getting picked on. And I wanted to be able to help find a way to get kids in my community active. So that was
really cool.
That was my kind of original thought behind Team Winter. And then when my dad was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I knew I wanted to shift the focus a little bit. And through sport, I was able to kind of combine both of those and be out there encouraging kids to lead an active, healthy, and positive lifestyle, but also to not only race for themselves, but for a cause. So for several years, I was the Iron Kids Ambassador, which was a youth triathlon series. So I was able to be out there at all these different races every weekend with my mom, not only talking to and cheering on these kids, but spreading my message about prostate cancer, because it was a disease that affects just as many men as breast cancer affects women, and the men didn't want to talk about it, so a 9-year-old girl was going to talk about it for them.
Yeah, which is really cool. And I want to kind of touch on 2 points that you just brought up. One, I love the initial focus of Team Winter, and that's part of the reason why I started the Podium Athlete, is to get kids to play sports longer, because sports not only teach kids leadership skills, they can make friends, but it helps them develop a body positive image of themselves and gives them a chance to exercise, learn how their body works, and build habits young that they can keep using as they get older. So I love that you touched on that, because I mean, childhood is pretty hard for everyone. There's the awkward phases, there's the puberty phases, and there's just things that happen in schools. I think sports is such a great way to help kids feel like they're a part of a team and to build their self-esteem. So that's awesome. And then you're age 9, starting a nonprofit. Tell us a little bit about what Team Winter does.
So it's a nonprofit for prostate cancer research and awareness. Over the years, I've had athletes racing in Team Winter gear, spreading the message about prostate cancer. Awareness is a big part of it, because as I said, a lot of people just don't know how common prostate cancer is.
Very true.
And then the other side of it is raising funds throughout, especially my marathons, my triathlons, and all of those other races and events. I've been able to raise over $500,000 for the cause.
That is
and
great.
One of the coolest things for me is a lot of that money went to the Prostate Cancer Foundation to be able to fund new young researchers. And they actually, with the money Team Winter helped raise, developed a new drug to treat those aggressive forms of prostate cancer like the kind my dad had. So it's pretty encouraging to see the money go to something so beneficial and to be actually making a difference.
Yeah, and what a great way to, honor your father who passed away. And again, as research has progressed and gets, further along, hopefully with screening and different testing and drugs, you can treat that so not as many people have to lose their lives.
For sure.
And you just mentioned marathon running. Now, I've never run a marathon. I've been in the Army for 18 years. The longest I've rucked about 20, 25 miles. I usually run 5 to 6, but you were at the time the youngest person to run a marathon on every continent, including Antarctica. So tell me, first question, what made you want to do that? And then let's talk about what your favorite marathon of those 7 were.
So I always enjoyed the longer races. Growing up in Michigan, especially small town northern Michigan, there weren't many kids races. We had to travel to Canada or to some other states, usually in our motorhome, to go find the kids races. So naturally, I just started doing the adult races. I did the 5Ks and then 10Ks, and on the triathlon side would start doing adult sprint triathlons. Eventually, I ended up doing an Olympic distance triathlon, and this was the last race my dad ever saw me finish and was at the finish line for. This was in Florida when I was 9 years old, and so this was a race many people said, oh, you're too young, you're never going to make a finish. Like, I was tiny. Looking back now at pictures, I'm like, No wonder people were saying that. I was so
They were
small.
like worried about you.
Yeah, and I ended up finishing the race fine, beat many adults, finished it, I think, in about 4 hours. And as I said, that was the last race my dad was ever at the finish line for. So after that, I was always looking for something bigger and better to do in his memory. One day, I was looking through a Guinness Book of World Records on my couch, saw the youngest person to run a marathon on all 7 continents, thought, I want to get this record for my dad. I didn't think I would actually be able to do it. Yeah. I told my mom I wanted to do it, but I was like, travel to every single continent in the world? I didn't think that was going to be possible. But as I said, my mom is quite the go-getter and immediately started planning. So we ended up doing all 7 marathons in about a 18-month time span. Wow. We started off in Eugene, Oregon. So that was the first marathon I ever did, was the first one for this marathon tour. So we were kind of planning this, and I hadn't even finished one race yet. But we did that one. We did Kenya for Africa. Then we had, I think number 3 was, might mess up the order here, but Antarctica. Wow. Then we had Inca Trail to Machu Picchu in Peru, which I'll come back to in a second. We did Mongolia for Asia, New Zealand for Oceania, and then finished on the original course of the marathon in Athens, Greece. So they were all very different courses, and I get that question all the time, what was my favorite one? And it's so tough because they had such different experiences with each one. I mean, the last one was on the original course of the marathons. Really There's so much history. And then in Kenya, we got to go into an all-girls boarding school and help educate girls there and go into the different communities, which was incredible. In Antarctica, we got to learn about preserving the wildlife and the ecosystem down there. The hardest one was for sure the Inca Trail to Machu Picchu.
Just with the hills.
This one was stone steps, a foot or two, like very uneven, huge steps for the majority of the course. And it went over 3 mountain passes. So it was crazy elevation. One of them was called Dead Woman's Pass. Not very encouraging for when you're trying to do this.
And you're how old at this point? 10, 11, 12?
So I started when I was 13 the marathons. Okay. And then we did them when I was 13 and 14 and finished just before turning 15. Okay. So I was out there running Dead Woman's Pass up and down these stone steps. The whole race took, I think it was 7 to 9 hours. And I was the top female finisher. Wow. And so it took that long for the majority of people, if not longer. So it was a pretty much like an ultra marathon, but it was just the marathon distance.
That's insane. So real quick, Antarctica, what was the temperature outside when you were running that marathon? Because obviously, you picture marathon, everyone runs in shorts, a t-shirt, because you're carrying that weight for that long. What was the temperature like, and what were you wearing when you did the marathon down there in Antarctica?
So the crazy thing about that race was we were actually supposed to take this trip several weeks before we ended up taking it because our ship had hit an iceberg. No joke. The ship that we were supposed to take had hit an iceberg. It was damaged, so we couldn't take it. I was getting ready to pack up to go for this trip, immediately got an email that said urgent, so we opened it, my mom and I, and it said the trip was delayed several weeks because of this. So we kind of had to shift around the schedule. By the time we went down there, we were one of the last ships down in Antarctica because it was a lot later in the season than they were expecting.
And darker.
Yes. And we ended up lucking out, though. So the day before the race, it was really bad weather. We couldn't even go ashore. Normally they'd take you ashore. You'd check out, get your feet on land a little bit. Since we've been on a ship for several days coming down from the tip of Argentina. And so we kind of did our warm up on the ship as best we could. Next morning, kind of fingers crossed, waking up, we were just hoping that the weather had cleared, and sure enough, it did. So when we ran that race, it actually was about 20 degrees Fahrenheit and very little wind. There can be 100-mile-an-hour katabatic winds down there, but we completely lucked out with that and had quite nice weather. So it was along the research bases, so it was all frozen cat tracks basically. So I had my shoes with some like grips on them, and then I had, I think, a layer or two on bottom of some windproof leggings with layer or two on top, some gloves, a hat, sunglasses, but that's about it. Nothing too crazy because we had such beautiful weather.
Well, I love that you were definitely a winter athlete when beautiful weather is 20 degrees outside. That's awesome that you had a chance to do that. And how inspiring to go and run a marathon on all of those continents. That's very, very cool. So I do want to, it sounds like things went pretty well and you had a pretty successful career as a child, at least doing sports. Was there ever a time though where you wanted to quit or sports was harder and that you wanted to kind of maybe take a step back and you were doing maybe too much?
It was for sure a tough transition period when I got into aerials. Yeah. So I had been doing the ski racing in the winter, triathlons, and running in the summertime, but trying to do all of them got a bit tricky when I got to a certain point. And I loved doing both. I didn't feel like I had to choose right in that time, but there were other people, other coaches who were telling me I basically had to make a decision. So actually, even before aerials, when I was getting ready to do these marathons, I had an issue with my marathon coach that I was being coached by when I first started because he didn't believe that I could successfully train for these marathons while I was trying to ski.
Okay.
And so he ended up dropping me as his athlete just 6 weeks before my first marathon. So I had done all the training leading up to this point. I had done my long runs before my ski training, after school, all this stuff. And he was like, I can't coach you anymore. So here I was all of a sudden without a coach, pretty much at the start line of my first marathon ever. And as a 13-year-old girl, I was like, what did I do wrong? It was very difficult, but luckily my mom was like, I'm gonna find you a new coach, and she did, and then was able to kind of get back on track with that. But there was certainly times like that where people were like, you can't do both. But then even later when I started aerials, I kind of had to make the decision to back off of one to pursue the other, because trying to do all the marathon and triathlon training on top of now at that point doing doubles onto snow for aerial skiing just became too much to try to train at the same time. And so I had to make the decision there to pick one or the other to kind of move forward with at that period.
No, I think it's a hard decision. I'm a big fan of kids doing multiple sports between ages 5, 10, 5 to 12, but fully acknowledge at some point you have to narrow that down to maybe one or two sports. If you want to be the best in the world at a thing, then you really got to kind of put all your focus into that. But I think it is really hard. You grow up doing these sports that you love and you want to do and you have a passion for, and you have some level of success in those sports. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, I have to choose. And you're 12, 13, 14 years old, and it's hard, but it's great. You had your mom there and some other coaches to help support you through that. You mentioned getting into aerials. What is it that drew you to the sport? Because I've known a couple aerialists. They ski, but also a lot of them come from a gymnastics background. Do you have a gymnastics background at all, or do you just say, hey, that looks really cool, and I think if I work hard enough, I can do it?
I had zero gymnastics background. A lot of people who start aerials have some sort of acrobatic background, whether it be gymnastics or trampoline or tumbling, something like that, where you have that air awareness of knowing how to flip and twist, get to your feet. I didn't have any of that. So starting aerials was quite intimidating for sure, but I was young and willing to try new things. I was invited to come out here to Park City to try out aerials at the recruitment camp back in 2011. I first met Emily Cook at a Women's Sports Foundation event in New York City. She saw some clips of me doing ski racing, thought, hey, you're pretty tiny to be a ski racer. Why don't you come try my sport of aerials? I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, but I was like, well, an Olympian's invited me to go stay with her. That's so cool. How could I say no? Yep. So I came out that next summer in 2012. I was 13, tried aerials for the first time ever, landed on my head, on my stomach, on my back, every way except for my feet, trying to do my first backflips off the water ramps. But I guess they saw something in me, whether it was because I was willing to keep trying again and again, but they gave me the summer scholarship. So I trained the rest of the summer, ended up moving out here with a host family at just 13 years old to pursue this sport. I didn't know exactly where it was going to take me, but I thought it was an incredible opportunity that I didn't want to pass up. I always kind of had a little bit of urge to learn more of the trick side of skiing, but growing up in Michigan, I didn't know it was out there. I always would kind of steal, especially when I moved out to Oregon, was training at Mount Bachelor. I'd steal my teammates' twin tip skis if we had a powder day or things like that, and they'd try to teach me a 180 or 360. So I always had a little bit of that desire to do something besides go around some gates.
Okay. And then drawing on one thing you just said, you're doing the sport for the first time and it's not going well. What would be your advice for kids out there that are trying a new sport or trying something new to balance staying enthusiastic about trying it, but also just having that fear of looking dumb, of not doing very well when you're starting out? What would be some advice you would give to kids to encourage them to try new things and be okay with it not going well?
I think the biggest thing is just focusing on yourself. It's so easy to start comparing yourself to others, and even now it is extremely difficult still to not compare myself to others, especially I'm sitting here injured, to not be looking at everybody else being like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. And so I say this knowing it is so hard, but especially when you're learning something new, who cares what other people think? Unless, they're not the ones that are out there doing it. You're the one putting yourself out there. And if you just focus on that, trying new things, accept, hey, I'm not going to be the best at this, but I'm going to keep trying my best to get better every single day. If you keep putting that work in, you're going to get better. No matter what, it's going to slowly or quickly, depending on what you're doing, it's going to happen if you focus on tiny little things every day to make yourself better.
No, I think that's crucial. I love what you said is don't focus on what other people think. Don't compare yourself. And eventually you will get better. If you put time in, you will see improvements, what you're trying to do. They might be small at first, but every day keep getting better. It's good to know. And I love sharing these stories of how people started because, again, it's not like your first day off the doubles or the jumps. You were just doing 3 or 4 flips and landing on your feet. It did not go well from what it sounds like. Your first week, month, that first year even, I'm sure there were a lot of growing pains where you doubted what you were doing, but you had the confidence in yourself and the courage of what your potential could be, not 3 months from now, not 6 months from now, but 5 years to 10 years down the road. And it clearly, paid off for you. So let's kind of talk about that. When did you realize that you could potentially do this sport in the Olympics? You started when you were 13 years old in 2013 timeframe, 2012?
Yep.
So when did you realize you could potentially make a Olympic team?
So the first goal was to make the U.S. ski team. I knew roughly what I had to do to get there. I had to be competing doubles on snow and win the NORAM Tour. So that was a couple-year process, but in order to get there, it was kind of defined steps that I knew I had to take. First, I had to do a single backflip. Then I had to do my first doubles, then be able to learn twisting doubles and things like that. So I kind of took it one step at a time, focusing on those first. One thing that I had going for me was that I knew how to ski very well. Coming from the skiing background, I knew as soon as I got to my feet that I'd be able to land a jump. Yeah. So it took me a lot longer to learn a lot of the tricks compared to other people. It took me several years to be able to get to the point where I was doing triple twisting, double backflips, and that was a very frustrating process. But then once I did learn them, I could land them if I was anywhere near a close position, which is what some of the people who come from a different background struggle with, like the gymnasts, whereas they may be able to get everything done in the air, but then if they're not comfortable on their skis, they have trouble landing. And landing's 30% of our score, so it's pretty important. You're not going to get very far if you can't land in this sport. So I think I always knew I could do something because I had that ability to land. But it was still a constant struggle because I was moving a bit slower through the trick progression and felt like I, wasn't keeping up with some of my competitors on that field. And so I think the first time I really thought that I could get to the Olympics was probably when I made a podium for the first time at the World Cup level. So I'd made the ski team, been on the ski team for a couple years, but then I blew my knee just before the 2018 Olympics. And so that set me behind a whole year then. But when I came back, I put my head down, focused on learning those triple twisting double backflips, landed one in a competition for the first time and ended up winning that comp. So the first podium I ever got was my first win. And that really gave me a taste of, okay, this is possible.
That's really cool. And one thing you said was, your goal was to make the Olympic Games. But first, there were these small steps to go. I think sometimes it's hard. You have this really lofty goal and these really big dreams, and it can seem very daunting of how do I get to that point. And it sounds like you had some good mentors and coaches that helped kind of lay out what that pathway was. It was first, hey, let's land these jumps first. Then let's make the team. Then let's go to these competitions and let's see how well you do there. And then once you do well, then you're on the national team, and then you kind of have a chance to make the games. I think that's an important thing to think about. It can seem daunting, especially if you look at it from one day, like, okay, I'm currently here to make the Olympics. I need to be here, and that gap is just massive. So I think trying to set those small goals en route to that large goal is absolutely huge. And then you get those small wins, which keeps you encouraged. If your goal is to make the Olympics in 8 years, there's a lot of days between then and there. But if you can make those small goals to hit certain, whether it's a jump or make a certain team or to land a certain trick, I think that's absolutely huge.
And it's tough, too, when you only have that one big goal, because unfortunately, our biggest goals and dreams, especially if they're big ones, they don't always happen, or maybe happen when we want them to. And so, like I said, when I was going for 2018, I had that goal of getting to the Olympics, and that kind of came crashing down 3 weeks before in the Olympic qualifiers is when I tore my ACL. And without those small steps, I think it can make that whole process seem pointless or not even worth it. But by having those small steps, I knew I still had accomplished so much on the way there. I had been doing my doubles. I had made the U.S. ski team, had competed at World Cup competitions. And so coming back from that injury, I knew I had kind of that next step to still take. It wasn't like I had tried to make one big jump, missed, and I was back at ground zero. Like, I still had that progress along the way.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So you're right before the trials. Again, making your first Olympics, there's nothing like it because your family, your hometown, everyone is so excited for you, and you were that close. You hurt your knee and did not make it. What kind of helped you pull out of that lull? Of course, you had this high where you might make it, and all of a sudden you were in this low. What got you through that low and gave you the motivation to keep going to train for 2022?
I think the biggest thing was that I just had a love for the sport, and I wanted to push myself and to be able to get back to the sport that I loved. So number one was just getting back out there so that I could do flips and fly in the air again. Number two was I still had that goal, and I knew there was going to be another chance, even though it was 4 years down the road, which is crazy. You know, you think about like your NFL and stuff, they got the Super Bowl, which is a huge event, but that's every year. Yep. Like, Olympics is every 4 years, and that's a long time, especially when you're like a kid or like in your teen years moving through your 20s. Like, you don't got many opportunities with that. And so after 2018, I was just focused on getting back healthy again, number one, but then also focusing on what I needed to improve on to put myself in an even better position to make that next Olympic team.
Yeah. And then injuries happen in sports, and they can be, you know, as big as yours where you tore an ACL. There's other times where you will miss a game or a competition. I guess, what was your mindset as you did rehab from a torn ACL? Because that was 8-9 months, a year of rehab. How did you kind of stay strong during that, and how did you stick with the plan?
It was a especially difficult time, especially when I was sitting there doing rehab, watching everybody else compete and go to the Olympics. Luckily, not for everybody in this situation, but for me, it did help to have other athletes who were in the same position. So one of my teammates had blown his knee about a month before I did, so we were going through that rehab process together. I also had a couple other athletes in similar U.S. ski and snowboard sports who were going through it, so we kind of had at least a little group together that we could go through the suck together with. So that for sure helped. And then I think it really helped to focus on some of the other things in my life too. Like, I was doing school, and having my family there to be able to go on some trips maybe I wouldn't have had time for before was really important, to be able to take that time and say, okay, you know, I can't be out there competing, but I'm going to go spend some good time with my mom and brothers that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
No, I think that's great. I think that's, again, going back to why I think sports are so important. Just having that community around you when things aren't going well, whether they could be teammates, it could be friends, it could be your family or school or some sort of distraction to keep yourself going. I think that's absolutely huge. Obviously, rehab went well. You stayed motivated. So what was the lead up to 2022 like? Did you have success that very next year, or was it kind of a long road to eventually make the games in 2022?
So the year after I came back was 2019. I had one of my best seasons yet. I think I made top 10 in the world at the end of the World Cup tour. So that was kind of like the first big winter back. Then I remember, I think it was that year, I actually switched coaches. So I was coached by one of the team coaches for many years, but I kind of felt like I was stagnant and needed a change. And so I ended up requesting to switch to one of our other coaches. And I think that was really beneficial for me because he kind of pushed me, especially on the degree of difficulty side. Like I said, I feel like I was moving kind of slow without that acrobatic background, and he kind of helped, gave me that push that was like, hey, doesn't matter that you didn't have it. Like, we're here, we're doing this now, and helped instill in me a little bit of confidence that it didn't matter what I had done in my past. Like, we were going to do this moving forward. And that year with it's called a double full, I won my first World Cup ever, which is the one I was just talking about with Moscow, Russia. That was, I want to say might have been 2020 or 2021. So it was just before, kind of leading up to the games there. I ended up having an incredible kind of breakthrough season. I won that event. And then I turned around, got a third place at the Belarus World Cup, then got a second place. I think it was at Deer Valley World Cup. So I had 3 amazing competitions, finished the year very strong. I ended up qualifying early for the last Olympics because there was kind of one spot that was up for grabs if you had good results from the season prior. So I had gone into the Olympic season in 2022 knowing that I was already qualified and had my spot.
That's
so
awesome.
Then it was all about staying healthy, still focusing on making sure my tricks were good and ready to go.
Okay. There's 2 things you said there that I love. I just want to highlight. One of them is one of the coolest things about the Olympic sports is when you go compete on these World Cups, there's nothing better than seeing your country's flag waved. And when you win a World Cup on a different country's soil, to see the American flag come up and hear the anthem is always amazing. So that's awesome. We had a chance to do that. And then another thing is just, I've heard this quite a bit. I've seen this in my own sport. You see it in different sports, whether it's basketball, baseball, football, where an athlete gets hurt, and sometimes taking that mental break can help re-motivate because you're not there on the hill, you're not competing. It kind of changes your perspective, and you can see things differently than when you're going through it as, trying to compete all the time and trying to keep yourself peaked. I thought that was really cool that you said that. I have seen that thread. So I think it's important to note when you do get hurt or maybe you get benched or things aren't going well, if you're going through a slump, take that time to mentally recharge, find your why, and kind of work on the things you can still work on mentally and make you a mentally stronger athlete, because I think that will help. That's awesome. Yeah, one of your best seasons was right after you missed a whole year of doing jumps.
I think that happens a lot too. And as terrible as it is to go through these injuries and things like that, especially when you're in it, when you come out on the other side, there is this sense of renewed confidence and love for the sport. I think it really gives good perspective. And, there's athletes out there who maybe haven't gone through those tough times and they'll start to get kind of complacent or be like, oh, I don't want to be here at training today. This sucks. I don't want to be in the middle of China for this competition. But those of us that have gone through the tough times, I'm just excited to be out there. It doesn't matter if it's a really crappy place we're in, if the weather's bad. I'm still out there. I'm healthy for the most part. Even if I'm like hurting, I'm going to give it my all at this competition because I know what it's like to not be able to do that. Yep. And so to have that opportunity is one of the best things that you can have and one of the things that I look forward to most.
Yep. So let's talk about a little bit of the confidence that you had. So your sport, again, I've talked about it a couple times, is just you fling yourself in the air, spin, flip, and land. How important is visualization in your sport? 'Cause you can only get, I'm assuming when you're on the hill or when you're practicing in the pool, how many reps do you get a day?
So on water ramps, we get, I'd say roughly 10 to 30.
Okay. If
we're having one session a day, you might just get your 10 to 15. If there's a double session, you could get as most as 30, but that's like a very heavy day.
Yep.
Especially on snow, those numbers are going to be less.
Yes.
You may get 6 to 13 on snow. If you're doing easier tricks like a single, you might get up to like 16. But if you're doing your highest degree of difficulty, triple backflips, you might only do 6. So visualization is crucial for us, especially if you're a bit nervous, if you're doing a trick for the first time. A lot of what you're going to put out there is coming from up here first.
Yep.
So we do a lot of breath work, a lot of visualization, making sure that in my head I can picture what I want to do, or at least focus on those key feelings, like my core squeezing, feeling my toes down. I'll sit there in my room at night, lay just on my back, imagine the jumps I'm doing. Sometimes too, I'll actually do the arm movements. You'll see a lot of us at the top of the jumps doing these funny arm movements because we're kind of getting our mind and body connected, knowing exactly what we need to do. It all happens so fast that you have to be in a very clear headspace before you turn your skis. I've worked on this over the years, is sometimes if you're getting so nervous at the top, you'll just hop, turn, and go, and your mind will kind of go blank. You'll go on autopilot. Bad habits might start to kick in. Even if you do the jump fine, it's not going to be your best work. And so taking those deep breaths, focusing on those couple key things before I turn my skis to know that I am present and have that mental headspace to be able to focus on those key feelings is really important.
No, I think that's huge. That's something, as a kid, I had never even heard the word visualization all through high school sports, even into college sports. I was a track athlete in college, but it was till I got into the Olympic movement, Olympic sports, where I really started to hear the perks of using sports psychs, of using visualization. I wish I could go back in time as a high school athlete, maybe have done some of those things where you just breathe prior to going, where you really take the time, okay, on this play or when I do this race, visualizing that is just so powerful. And I love how you pulled out that thread again, because your sport, you definitely need it because you don't get a ton of reps. So you have to actually see it in your head a whole bunch of times first.
And I think visualizing even the nerves that you might have for a competition is really important, because it's hard to simulate a lot of this stuff in training. So if you do get the opportunity to do practice competition jumps, for instance, our coach will be like, all right, this is the last one. This is Olympic super finals. Like, go do it. You can kind of simulate it a little bit, but it also is very helpful to sit there, visualize what it might be like to be there standing at the top of the Olympic jump. So even last season, we had the Olympic test event in Italy. I wasn't able to be there because I was injured. I had my coach send me a picture from the top of the jump where I would be starting so that I can kind of get that in my head, so that I can use that in my visualization, be able to picture myself at the top of that jump, feel the nerves, feel how anxious you are with your family and crowd and everybody down there, and be able to figure out ways to control that to be able to execute.
Yeah. And I want to highlight that even Olympic athletes, before we jump, or before we compete, still get those feelings in our guts, and you call them being nervous, being excited. And I saw a cool study that says the highest performing athletes view that as being excited, and you harness that. Like, okay, I'm feeling this way. One of the best coaches I had told me, when you feel nervous or you feel that pit in your stomach, it means you're about to do something important and that you care about. And that's the other thing. So harness those feelings. Don't be afraid. Like, oh, I'm nervous. That means I'm not prepared. That means I'm not going to do well. That's not what it means. It means your body is so amazing and you've trained it so well to know that it needs to go to this next state. You need to be hyper alert of what's about to happen. And I love that you touched on that, because even the best athletes in the world still get anxious, still get nervous, but they harness that. They use it as a positive, where your body is prepped and ready. Your vision's clearer. You hear things differently. And your body's in this flow type of state. I think it's important for kids to not run from being nervous. Don't run from those feelings. Embrace them, saying, okay, I'm not nervous, I'm excited. If you just change that one word, it changes the way you approach that and the way that you feel. Go to 2022, you made the Olympics. How validating was that, or how great was that feeling when you finally realized you made it? And then what was kind of your favorite part about the Olympic Games?
So leading up to the Olympics, I knew I had my spot, but I still needed to get to the games. And from my experience in 2018, I still had nerves going in, because in our sport, injuries happen and it's pretty high risk. So every jump, you have to be focused and present to be able to make sure that you're not making any dumb mistakes. And so leading up to the games, I'd say I still just had a little bit of nerves in the back of the head. So when I finally, I think, could take a deep breath was when I took that first Olympic jump to know I had done it. I didn't get quite the results I wanted at that Olympics, though. I kind of finished in the middle of the pack. wasn't my best day, wasn't my worst. I landed my jumps, but there were some bobbles, wasn't perfect form in the air. And so I didn't get what I really wanted to out of it, but it was still incredible to be able to say that I had gone to the Olympics. I think one of my favorite memories was walking out to those Olympic rings during opening ceremonies. So we kind of came out of the tunnel and they had the huge rings out there. Powerful. It was so incredible. Like, they were literally just one of the most beautiful things I feel like I'd ever seen. And then to be out there standing at the top of the jumps, knowing that I had made it that far and was competing amongst the best in the world. One of the tough things about that Olympics, though, is we couldn't have any family and friends there.
The COVID games.
Yep. Yeah. And so even the month before I left, I couldn't be around my family. We were in separate quarantine housing here in Park City, where we had a guy, a girl, a coach, and a staff in every household, so that if one household got COVID, it didn't take out the whole like women's team or the whole staff or the whole meds team. Yep. And so we were really isolated for that whole month before and during the games. And so I remember for sure one of the most emotional points for me was coming back to the airport after the Olympics and seeing my mom and my brothers there for the first time since the games. Was kind of just like, I just like started crying because I was like, oh my gosh, to have gone through that experience but not having any of that family and friends support was really tough.
That is very hard. So two things. Again, I think it was great. And I think you had this dream when you set when you were 13 years old to make the Olympics. And all of a sudden you walk out and you realize I finally achieved that dream after all those small steps along the way. I think that is, I wasn't at the 2022 games. I competed in 10, 14, and 2018. So in some ways, obviously you want to make the most Olympics, but I was not competing at that time. I heard COVID made it very hard, not having fans, not having support systems there. So what has kept you motivated? You finally reached your dream of making the Olympics, but obviously you want to win a gold medal and be on the podium at the Olympic Games. So what is keeping you motivated? How has you maybe changed your training since 2022 as we head into 2026, which is only 6 months away, which is nuts?
So no matter what I've been doing in my life, I've always wanted to give my all. Losing my dad from a young age really just taught me the importance of taking every opportunity and trying to be the best that you can be, whether that's being, a good person, being kind to others, or being the best in your sport that you can possibly be. After the last Olympics, I felt like I still had more left in the tank. I didn't feel like I had done my best performance, but also I didn't feel like I was at the tricks that I was kind of capable of doing. So over the next several years, I worked my way up to doing triple backflips. So this is a trick that most women don't take or don't pursue in the sport of aerials. There's only a handful in the world who every year are usually competing these tricks, and only a handful of American females who have ever done triple backflips on snow. So I wanted to kind of add my name to that list. So the year after the games, I started training the triples on water, and then was able to do my first triple backflips on snow that next year. Wow. And so I think it was one of the most rewarding and happiest feelings I've ever had when I landed that first triple on snow for the first time. Yeah. Because I had, done I think I did 5 or 6 before I landed that first one. And the first one, it was just like so much nerves and anxiousness going into getting that first one on snow. Yep. Because it was such a daunting step. I mean, we're going so much faster in these jumps. You're doing a whole nother flip. It's way steeper, way more impact on landing. But when I landed that jump, it was kind of like that feeling when I had won my first World Cup. It kind of gave me that light of okay, I can do this. I can do these triple backflips. And I knew that I needed those triples to be able to win World Cups, to be able to win at the Olympics. And so over the last couple of years, I've been working on increasing the difficulty on the triples. Not this winter, the winter before, was able to do them on almost every World Cup stop, which was really cool for me because we had some crazy weather conditions, and I wanted to go out there and not prove to myself, but give myself confidence knowing that I could do it no matter what the conditions were. So I ended up winning half of the World Cups that year with my triples. Okay. Good for you. Which was really exciting. And then was able to get a couple triples off this year before I had my injury. But the main focus has been these triples because that's what I want to do on the Olympics to be able to have that shot at the gold.
Yeah, that's another wrinkle about our sport. So a lot of winter sports, ski, snowboarding, bobsled, skeleton, luge, we compete outdoors. So you just never know what the elements are going to do. And it kind of adds a wrinkle into your planning. So that's great that you had a chance to do that. So what does your qualifying look like right now going into 2026? I think you start sliding here in December. And then how many kind of competitions are there before the team is named for the 2026 games?
So I believe we have 6 competitions. So they'll start in late November, beginning of December. And then they'll run straight up until just the weeks before the Olympics. It's kind of a non-stop schedule. We'll go back to back to back competitions, and you basically need at least a podium or 2 at those competitions to be able to secure an Olympic spot. It's kind of interesting with aerial skiing because we're competing against all the other freestyle sports. Mm-hmm. So freestyle has your moguls, aerials, slopestyle, half pipe. I think ski cross might even be in there. Yeah. And so they give a certain amount of spots. I think it's 32 towards all these sports, but they don't specifically say how many goes to each.
Oh.
So when we're going into the Olympics, if there's like more slopestyle and mogul skiers doing well, they'll give more spots to them. If we have more aerialists doing well, we'll get more spots. So you want to be that top 1 or 2 because you don't know if they're going to give 2 spots, if they're going to give 4 spots. We've had Olympics in the past where they've had just 1 spot for one of the genders. At the last Olympics, I think we had 4 and 3, so we had a pretty full team, but that's no guarantee. And so you really want to make sure you're in one of those top 1 or 2 spots to give yourself the best chance.
Okay. We will be cheering for you and following your journey. I just want to ask kind of a couple closing questions that I ask each of my guests. But first, real quick, you wrote a book kind of about your journey. Do you want to grab it off the shelf here and kind of talk about what it meant for you to write a book and kind of what the book is about?
So this is my book, Winter's Rise, an Olympian's Journey of Love, Loss, Grit, and Glory. So I wanted to write this book originally just after the marathons. I thought those were such an incredible journey within themselves. A lot of publishers and people like that were like, oh, wait till you're an Olympian, then write your book. Like, wait till you're a little bit older or whatever it may be. But I was like, I want to get this story written down. And so I actually started writing this book the year before I went to the Olympics. So it was the 2020, 2021. I wasn't sure how the book was going to end because I hadn't made the Olympics yet, but I knew it was an incredible story nonetheless and wanted to share my message about pursuing big dreams and the challenges that come with it. So I wrote this book, self-published it. It's got photos and everything. And like I said, just wanted to share my story of how far I've came and, you know, the things that I've overcome, like losing my dad and going through these injuries, and think there's like a lot of things in it that help someone, whether they're 10 years old going through tough times or 45 years old.
Yeah, so that's great. So I think everyone out there, if you want to go check this book out, again, this podcast is only 1 hour long. We've gotten bits and pieces of her journey, but there's a lot more contained in this book. Again, Winter has a great story. And the kind of last 2 or 3 questions I ask every single guest is, what is one piece of advice a coach gave you that has resonated with you, had the largest impact on you? I know it's a tough one. You've had lots of great coaches. It's hard to pare it down from when you were a kid to where you're at now, but try and narrow it down to kind of 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you got from a coach.
I'd say one of the biggest ones for sure is from when I switched coaches to my current coach, Vlad, who was always super adamant on believing in yourself and trying it. It doesn't matter what you've done in the past or what you're trying to do. You just have to actually focus on making a change in that moment. So you can make he likes to joke like, oh, that's just an excuse. That's just an excuse. And so really just actively making those changes and focusing on that is going to make the biggest difference. That's
huge. I think trying to take action is always a big thing. We can think in our minds, we can get kind of in our own heads and not try something to get scared, but actually just go out there and set goals and take action. So that's awesome. And then another one, that I always ask is, what piece of advice would either you give your 10, 12-year-old self, 14-year-old self, or the kids that are out there now that are pursuing youth sports and going through the inevitable ups and downs that happen in sports, in life? What's kind of your biggest piece of advice or piece of encouragement that you would give those kids?
We talked about this a little bit, but focus on yourself. There's going to be a million other things going on, but if you just focus on making yourself better and doing what you can to improve every day, it's going to make a world of a difference.
Okay. And the last question, what are 2 to 3 exercises? They can be power-based, they can be strength-based, they can be a plyometric that you do, but what are some of those exercises that you do that help keep you in shape and really have helped have the biggest impact on you as an athlete?
I'd say one of the first ones is that core strength. We are coming into the jumps with our arms over our head, knees locked out, everything in a very planked position. And so having that core strength is really important for us. This isn't anything fancy. It's literally some Superman, some dead bugs, some Russian twists, some leg lifts, things like that. I stretch every evening before I go to bed and add in some of those. So even if it's 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, like 50 reps of those exercises, it's just something little every day to be able to get that core strength and maintain it. I'd also say another kind of basic one is just going to be that leg strength squats. Even if right now I can't put a bar on my back because of my neck.
Your neck, yeah.
So I've kind of had to modify it. So I do a lot of like leg press and belt squat instead. So finding ways to make do with what you're working with and your circumstances is really important. And I'd say the recovery thing, honestly, is probably one of the other biggest things. As I said, I just stretch before bed. Making sure I'm doing that mobility, making sure I'm warming up properly before I go out there and jump are all really important.
No, and I've touched on that quite a bit. The recovery piece, it's not because as you get older, you need to recover more. But I think even as a kid, again, you rarely recover. And I remember being so spent playing football and basketball and going from sport to sport to sport. And I wish I'd taken a little more time to do that. But the one I want to touch on really is the core aspect. I think it's so important. We get so locked into our own sport and doing just movements for those sports, whether it's lacrosse or football or baseball. But the cool thing about core is it connects your body to every movement that you do. And it is so important to do core type of work and to keep yourself stable. And I think it will significantly reduce the injuries that kids have if they're doing core work. So that's a great thing. So what are some of your favorite core exercises?
I'd say some of my favorites are doing anything mat with, you can make them a little bit tougher. You can put your feet on like a slider and do pikes, or on a ball. I do a lot of Pilates lately. And so any sort of like stabilization stuff is surprisingly difficult. We do like a lot of leg lifts, whether that's hanging from a bar. Right now I don't do much hanging, so I'll kind of modify them by putting my feet, a ball between my feet, and kind of doing leg lifts with that, forward or backwards. There's a whole different things. I mean, there's so much you can do, whether you just have a mat or if you have other things you can work with. Like I said, it's nice to be able to kind of combine stuff sometimes. So like your planks, where you're not only working on that movement, like feeling like you're getting strong in certain movement patterns, but also just having that stability while you're standing there.
Yep. I appreciate those answers. I just love to give people kind of a sneak peek behind the scenes of what elite level athletes like yourself do to keep themselves in shape, kind of prepare for competitions. So in closing, I guess, how can we support you going into the 2026 Olympic Games, whether it's you or your nonprofit?
I think the biggest thing is just following along the journey. Check out my book for sure. Follow on Instagram. It's just at Winter Vinecki. I'll be posting a lot of my jumps and progress, especially coming back from this injury on there. Hopefully be posting good news about qualifying for Olympics, maybe an Olympic medal. And so mainly just following along, giving the support in that way, because it really is about who you surround yourself with, and it takes a village to get to where we're going.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. What an inspiring story of what you've accomplished from age 5 all the way until now. We're very excited to watch your journey. So like and follow all of her pages. Go buy her book, and we'll be watching for great things from Winter here at the 2026 Olympics, which is only 6.5 months away. Okay, thank you.